All right, a little more background before we get to the U.S. Constitution. In the last talk, I briefly described the Articles of Confederation. So here's the movement I want you to see. We start off with the Declaration of Independence, followed by the Articles of Confederation. Now we have something called a debate between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, and this is going to lead us to the U.S. Constitution. Okay, so we declared ourselves free from England, and it took us a war to prove that and to establish that, but eventually we were free. 1783, we were free, and we were done with our independence with England. We have in 1781 the Articles of Confederation, which are our first constitution. In short, it did not work. It was beautiful, but it was idealistic. The idealism was its beauty, but its idealism was at the same time its death fall. It really wanted to limit the big central government. They'd come out of a king from England where they did not want a big government dictating down to them what they could and could not do. And they thought the individual states was the best way to preserve the rights of the people and let people move from state to state if that's what they wanted to do. And so you have a lot of very conservative ideas right there in the Articles of Confederation. Now, again, it's beautiful because it's idealistic. It is also problematic because it's idealistic. This idea that every state gets an equal vote, that's a problem. It didn't work. This idea that the central government cannot collect taxes, it can only do so as the states of their own free will decide to pay. And this idea I didn't mention this in the last talk, to change the Articles of Confederation, those were big problems that I just mentioned with the Articles of Confederation. But to change it and to tweak it or to modify it to make it work, it was impossible because it required every single state of the 13 to ratify it in their Congress or in their House of Representatives. So in other words, hey, we got a document, a guiding governing document that rules over us, and we can't change it because we'll never get unanimous agreement amongst the 13 states. And so the American people were kind of stuck without any ability to raise taxes, without any ability to therefore fund a war if France or England decided to come back to us and try to fight with us now. So we were kind of sitting there very vulnerable for about 6 years. And the conclusion that really America came to at this point, about 1787, was that the Articles of Confederation do not work. Now, there's a debate at this point. What do we do about it? It doesn't work, so what do we do? And there's two schools of thought. One school of thought is to say the problem is the document itself, the philosophy behind the document, meaning the philosophy of confederation. What they said is we need a new philosophical model. We need to shift from a confederate model to a federal model. And those people that adopted that mindset were known as the Federalists. Okay? Now, the people that said, no, we need to keep a confederation and only tweak this a little bit, those were called anti-federalists. So you've heard of this debate between the Federalist and the anti-federalist. What is that all about? This is a philosophical debate in America at this point between those who think we need a fundamentally different approach to government and those who think we need to maintain this initial conservative Confederate model that allowed states to be supreme. And those were called the Anti-Federalists, and those who thought we needed to go to a new model, which is ultimately what won with the U.S. Constitution, those were called the Federalists. So from 1787 through about 1789, there's this public debate in the newspapers all throughout America between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. So the Federalists were pro-Constitution, where we ended up landing with our U.S. Constitution today. So the Federalists eventually won, but they were pro-Constitution. They were against, however, the Bill of Rights. Okay, the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Now, there's 27 amendments to the Constitution today. The day we ratified the Constitution, it had 10 amendments to it. And those 10 are called the Bill of Rights. Now, those amendments or those rights that are prescribed there, that was basically a bargaining chip with the Anti-Federalists to get them to come over to the Federalist side. The Anti-Federalists were pro-Articles of Confederation, and they were pro-Bill of Rights. So in other words, the Anti-Federalists were saying the only way we'll leave a Confederate model to a federal model is if you grant us in this new Constitution, you secure basic rights like the right of free speech, the right of freedom of religion, like the right to bear arms, like so on and so forth. Those first 10 amendments, we talk about them as the First and Second Amendment today. We debate them nonstop. So you can go back and you read those. You'll read them here as you're going through the U.S. Constitution. So you ultimately have a debate between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. The Federalists win, but only by granting the Bill of Rights. Now, real quick, why would they be against? Why would the Federalists be against a Bill of Rights? Because they say things like, you and I have the freedom to speak our mind. You and I have the freedom to bear arms. You and I have the freedom to practice our religion as we see fit. Why would the Federalists be against that, saying that? Well, it's a very simple reason. They weren't against any of those principles. They absolutely affirmed them. But what they thought is that those ideas that are affirmed in the first 10 amendments were already obvious throughout the entire Constitution, and they did not need to have a special articulation like this. In fact, they were worried that if we took the time to specifically enumerate these types of things instead of just understanding that those things are already present in the Constitution, they were afraid that by enumerating them, the impression would be given that these rights and only these rights are granted to us, and that any other rights are not granted to us. And so they thought that enumerating them and listing them would somehow limit us, actually. And so they just said, no, no, no. But at the end of the day, the only way they could get the Anti-Federalists to come over was by granting the Bill of Rights. And so historically, here's what you need to see. Again, we start with the Declaration of Independence. We then have the Articles of Confederation. Then that doesn't work, and we have the debate between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, and the Federalists win. We end up with a U.S. Constitution, but the Anti-Federalists win by getting the Bill of Rights in it, and so that's where we are. And we still have those today. Now, of course, the First and Second Amendments today get debated all the time. The freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, separation of church and state, the right to bear arms. Those first two amendments are debated constantly in our world. And so, bon appetit, read and enjoy. I hope that helps you understand what you're reading as you go through the U.S. Constitution. Again, be looking out for how the Constitution addresses that balance of power between states having equal power and then those who carry a heavier burden having a little bit more influence in the government. So look out for that. I think you'll enjoy it. It's a brilliant, brilliant document, especially to be non-inspired by God like the books in the Bible are. So enjoy it, and we'll see you in the next talk.